because once we had a huge agrobiodiversity, now we don't have it anymore. If you go to the next slide, yeah. Anuj, if you could go to the next slide, yeah. Now, the second area that the intervention will come is that with related to the scale disadvantage of small farmers. Small farmers produce in very small quantities. So there has to be aggregation mechanism to take it to the market. And that is something that we need to do by developing value chains. But the supply chains in South Asia is very fragmented, and trader collusion is very high. But recently there are some good news. The aggregation models are somehow emerging. The the farmers producer organizations in India in selective basis are doing quite well. The online marketing platforms are doing well. I was reading about Bangladesh, and then when Bangladesh entered into the e-market, basically the satisfaction rate among farmers was 96%. So that is something that is a good news. And then the India most recently actually is basically doing away with Agricultural Produce Marketing Corporation Act that liberalizes the produce market. And that is actually, I think, and there are certain precautions that we have to take, but overall there's a good movement. And land tenure issues, as usual, as serious. I mean, if you take the case of Pakistan, 2% of the households hold more than 50% of the land. You can imagine the inequality there. And almost half of the farming population is landless, functionally landless. In India, Pakistan, not in India, but Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal, almost half of the farming households are landless. We have to deal with that issue, not necessarily through traditional land reform, which has failed again and again, but more as something like leasing, contract farming, this kind of new tools for aggregating the land, pooling the land. And the last thing I want to present is that the risk sharing mechanism is very important. On that, the formal insurance companies have not been doing that well. They do pretty well in livestock, but much less in crops. And whether South Asia has a microfinance model where it is very community-based models. If the community-based and the formal organization model could be merged together using both potentials, we could perhaps deal with the serious issue of moral hazards in the insurance business. Anuj, if you could go next. Anuj, if you could go next. And then the other part is the technology development and transfer. Of course, technology has huge range. I didn't want to deal with that. Basically, I'm presenting here the rules of engagement. What are the major areas that we have to engage? One is, of course, one thing we need to be very sure about is that the green revolution in India, particularly, and also in Pakistan, was fueled not only by the technology, but also by the price incentive. In India, you have 1971 famous report of Professor Kalo. So that report is as important as the green revolution technology. That was fueling that was acting as price incentive, and production was, at least in some areas in India and Pakistan, it was really benefiting. But honestly, that space doesn't exist anymore. The minimum support price in India is already a bit higher than the international prices. And there comes a time when actually consumer will come back and ask for, look, what is happening here? So the future growth will have to come not through price incentive, but the improved efficiency actually, and technology has a big role into that. The other engagement point is that agriculture in the future will be very, very knowledge intensive. It's partly because the agricultural value chains are becoming global. They are becoming very long. Food safety issues are coming. Agroecological considerations, the nationally determined, climate change targets are there. The zoonotic disease are becoming very common. Food safety issue will become very common. So the agriculture will have to be very knowledge intensive. That is one on the technology side we need to remember. Technology generation in the past was much more in public sector, but now it's become more private, more international, and there are a lot of intellectual rights issue, property rights issue coming in. Climate change is another consideration. We need a lot of drought-resistant and heat-tolerant varieties. Even the floods will become very common, especially the Gangetic Plains and Bangladesh, and even part of Pakistan. Pakistan is already suffering quite a bit. and then even Nepal, for that matter, the whole of South Asia, because of our monsoon, we are very vulnerable to the flooding. So that is one thing that has to come. There's one thing that I want to make the point. The genetically modified products actually have a high potential. They cut down the R&D sort of elements very significantly by bringing genes from by transgenic process. We can even bring the gene outside of the species. But the issue, I don't think, in my personal opinion, I used to work in this issue for 3 years. The issue is less on the scientific. Actually, if the argument would go on only on scientific basis, we would perhaps have not suffered. But basically, we don't trust the regulatory mechanism. We don't trust, and perhaps there's a reason for that. And then that's where the issue is coming through, not because of science, but because of the trust that the government machinery lacks. Otherwise, countries like India do have the capacity to check the safety of the GM mechanism, or they can acquire it very, very quickly. So we could be quite safe scientifically. Anuj, let's move to the last slide.
It's there, sir. Carry on.
Okay. Then basically we need to, going back to our thing, this is, we have to go to the semi-arid areas, subhumid areas, and saline zones. Let's not forget about it. Indian coastal areas and Bangladesh are being hit severely by this. And then we have to reduce external environmental externalities, which is much more about, not only about technology, but also about management. So both issues are there. With the Green Revolution, Green Revolution is not a saturated concept. The input efficiency can go up, like is biological nitrification can reduce the nitrogen input quite significantly. Then we have to go for the ICTs, basically because it can be more accurate, it can reach quickly. The penetration rate in South Asia is not very high. 35% in India, Pakistan is 22%, Bangladesh 22%. But good thing about this is that it's increasing very fast. The growth rate is very high. So basically this mobile penetration ratio is very good. Finally, before I close down, I would like to request to you one thing. Many of the blames that we are putting on agriculture today, especially on Green Revolution, is not only about Green Revolution. Actually, sometimes when I see Green Revolution, I think that we are penalizing the boy, not only for his sin, but sin committed by his father. Many of the policy distortion in agriculture today in South Asia are policy-led. Like, the heavy nitrogen, imbalanced nitrogen application in India, it has nothing to do with Green Revolution. It's about the government heavily subsidizing nitrogen fertilizer. And similar story abounds all over the country. So, we have to, when you analyze the problem, we have to separate what is human-made and what is nature given. And the human-made part of the policy conundrum today is quite high. And we have to sort that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shyamji, for all your views about what you see are the issues related to productivity increases, as well as the policy issues that can actually influence this entire productivity scenario. And you very nicely pointed out the role that technology needs to play in the times to come. And I guess this brings about a nice transition point for us in understanding what is happening at the ground level and the work that is being done in specific countries and the response that is being coming. And let me invite at this stage, Mr. Boyon Kolunjija, who heads Oxfam Australia in Sri Lanka. He's the country director there. Bojan has spent a lot of time with Oxfam and understanding grassroots level issues globally, and I guess is well positioned to share with us ideas on how to incentivize smallholder farm owners and farm workers, how to incentivize adoption of technology, how to incentivize new methodologies that can actually be adapted at the ground level to bring about what we are all trying to do, enhanced and more efficient productivity with growth in farm incomes, which can help drive what Vijayji very nicely set out, agriculture-led recovery. So over to you, Boyan.
Thank you very much, and thank you to WRMS for inviting me to be a panelist among such esteemed colleagues. I'll not even try to reply to all the questions that have been posed to me, because when I was preparing for this webinar, at one point I realized that I'm coming up with even more questions than answers. But before starting, I will just briefly touch upon what Oxfam in Sri Lanka is doing and why we feel we can provide some input to this. So we operate for more than 30 years in Sri Lanka, focused on agriculture, climate resilience, and water and sanitation. Our key audiences are smallholder farmers. And we have been actively applying and developing what is called new technological solutions, trying to respond to numerous challenges that smallholder farmers are facing, and some of them have been mentioned in previous presentation. I'll just list few of the questions that we put to ourselves when we are approaching the problem, and when we are looking at what kind of technological solution we would like to deploy. First is what kind of problem we want to solve with the new technology, or what kind of problems we want to solve with the new technologies, because we have seen explosion of agrotech and fintech in last several years, and there are a number of different applications that are available. But then the question is how relevant they are, and what are the
बॉक्स रखे हैं आईफोन वाले, शेल्फ में कहीं मिल जाएगा तुमको, उसके अंदर पिन.
and what are the most appropriate ones. Now, the next question is also about how do we incorporate scientific research, which I think is really, really important, because there is plenty of knowledge available. Not so much has been turned into practical solutions. So how do we link the need scientific research into technological application? And last point that I would really like to emphasize, even though the question is about productivity and income, we would claim that we should not focus on income increase only. We need to look at environmental impact, at the climate change issues that have been also emphasized earlier, but also about gender issues and equitable access to technologies. Because we are seeing very different situations and very different types of access to technology between men and women in Sri Lanka, and I would also dare to say in wider Southern Asia region. Some of the points that we have identified when working with smallholder farmers. Very often we would witness low awareness and knowledge about advanced agricultural techniques, and even more about new technologies and access to different appliances. It's also about high costs that need to be involved, and poor access to financing in relation to high costs. And probably the key one is about the scale, in terms of how one farmer can afford applying a technological solution. We were also looking from service provider side in terms of what are the challenges that they are facing when deploying different products and applications in the market, and how do they reach the smallholder farmers. And there's lots of issues related to data availability, policy environment. Ineffective distribution channels is very often comes on the top. And also huge risk awareness, because smallholder farmers are still not recognized as the customer group as such. So this is something that impedes the successful link between new technologies and smallholder farmers, which also leads to scale in terms of how we can scale different products. I believe that we need to work more on recognition of the role, importance, and contribution of smallholder farmers. I believe that COVID-19 crisis is providing us in a way with a really good platform for that, because this was a true testament how fragile supply chains were and how they still are fragile, and that a number of customers and communities have been relying on smallholder farmers and their production. We were all very happy that availability of the products was good. But in our communication with larger corporates, they by consensus were saying that if it wasn't for input of micro and small farmers and their agency, it would be very hard to provide consistent supply. Now, our experience in working with smallholder farmers, the approach is about improving their agency to participate in the markets. We are very active in engagement with private sector and creating avenues for smallholder farmers to tap into their supply chains and consequently fortify them. And finally, we are working with the government on adequate policy environment. The key was to work with the farmers on improving their productivity, but it was equally important to aggregate their outputs and their market representation. In turn, this has provided them with a better negotiating power with larger actors and more weight to their policy asks. Now, how does the new technologies contribute to this process? For this purpose, I will focus on two, say, solutions that we have been deploying in the field. One is about automated water management systems, and another one is about weather index insurance, because insurance has been very often stated as something that is largely missing from the agriculture equation for smallholder farmers. Our systems have been providing information about water levels for those involved in the irrigation systems that have been provided information about quantity, location, and time about water to be released. Those that were part of index insurance, they received information about particular weather parameter to which the index was linked, for example, rainfall. And we have seen that with just, so it took us probably less than 2 years to develop these solutions that are not extremely technologically complicated or demanding. We are working with technology that is already existing, mainly about reordering the way how components are put together. All has been locally produced and not very expensive at all. While the results were amazing, starting from improved quantity of water that was available to farmers, last mile farmers being provided with water, productivity going up, and in terms of insurance, this was probably the biggest impact we had because everything was at the fingertip, and we didn't use, so everything was done. You didn't have to have a smartphone. I believe that these old phones were called now feature phones. So even with a feature phone, you would receive the information about the rainfall. You were able to sign on your policy and to understand what's the status of your claim and how soon you're going to receive it. So results in terms of accuracy and information exchange were really, really good. I think somebody mentioned also moral hazard was removed because everything was automated and all results were triangulated. And it was also about speed of the process because we removed a lot of manual operations. We removed a lot of manual assessments that can be very subjective, biased, and that helped a lot. If I'm to kind of identify the key learnings about applying new technology, it was about making an effort to understand the needs and interests of all actors. So while our key audience were smallholder farmers, we really analyzed well the market and everybody who was involved in particular industry and in particular product, let's say in this case insurance. We put enormous energy in educating all actors and putting them up to a kind of level playground that they understand each other's needs, that they understand each other's dynamics. And we demonstrated a lot because we were working with very, very conservative and suspicious audiences by nature. So we spent a lot of time into demonstrations. And finally, we developed business models. So we didn't want to run a project framework product, but we were looking at how we can create a sustainable business model and restrict our role to only a facilitator and a broker and a convener of relationship, if you will. I'm getting notice that I need to close. So I will just, my final words were that one of the key challenges for us was about striking the right balance, what's incentive, what's subsidy, and what's a giveaway, and how to set a proper formula to kind of work on demand and supply. I'll be happy to reply to all the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernd, for highlighting some of the local work to a few of the global solutions that have been touted, like index insurance. So it's heartening to hear of the impact too. And we'll continue in the same stream. But before I do that, as we are coming close to our first question and answer session shortly, I'd like to invite the audience to continue to please keep sending their questions. We'll try and answer some of them. We'll also try and see if we can reach out to some of you to ask the questions, but please continue to ask the questions, continue to type the questions, and we'll surely share them with the panelists as we go along. So understanding what the adoption issues are and how some of the adaptation can be done locally, let me at this stage invite Mohammad Fazlul Qadir, who is the Deputy Managing Director of PKSF in Bangladesh. PKSF, of course, is Pali Karma Sahayak Foundation, which has been doing yeoman's work for a number of years, both in agriculture and both on livestock as well as on crop side, and using local formulas to improve outreach and improve the spread of various services amongst the farming community. So without further ado, over to you, Fazlul Bhai, to take us through some Bangladesh examples and the work of PKSF.
Thank you, Pranabji. This is a very exceptional situation we are facing at this moment. The pandemic, I'm talking about the pandemic. Everything has become, totally different in the country. So the best incentive, I think, for the small and marginal farmers for increasing their productivity and lowering the risk would be to get back the pre-COVID situation. We all should work very hard so that as far as possible, we can get back to the pre-COVID situation, because under this kind of tension, people cannot work normally. And in Bangladesh at the moment, like in many other countries, we are in a bit of confusion. If you can look into the, uh, see how we took different strategies at different point of time, you can see the confusion because this is an unprecedented incident. I mean, we didn't know how to tackle this. And now we are not sure whether we are at the peak or not now at this moment. The demographers are there analyzing the thing. So nevertheless, life goes on and the government is at the same time putting emphasis on getting back to, I mean, making a trade-off between the health-related concern and the economic issues. So number one, I think in the Bangladesh was doing very well in the agricultural sector, because as you know that in this part of the world, I think in the entire subcontinent, farmers never wanted their sons to be farmers because this is a very low rewarding economic activity. And Bangladeshi farming sector, it was characterized by subsistence farming, as you all know. But we in mid-80s, we have proven with undoubted empirical evidence that subsistence farming may be very efficient also. But at the end of the day, it was subsistence farming. And now in recent days, with the advent of new technologies, Bangladeshi agriculture was switching from subsistence farming to commercial farming. And a new breed of entrepreneurs we were observing are coming to the farming sector. Like Bijoy have said, I mean, the new farming sector or agriculture sector will be very knowledge-based. We found that the university graduates and very educated people, they started coming to the farming sector. And we started thinking of ecological farming. We started focusing on the experiences of people like Subhash Palekar in India and Fukuoka in Japan, in other countries also. And we were also getting aware of the bad sides of so-called green revolution or chemical fertilizer revolution, if I put it straight, and the adverse effect on our environment, ecology, and even the quality of the food. We started even thinking of the food habit of our people. Maybe in South Asia, we eat lots of carbohydrate, which people like in China or Japan, they don't eat this amount of carbohydrate. They used to eat like us, but they have changed the food habit. And it is directly related with the production pattern also of the country. So what I'm trying to say is the agriculture sector, the philosophical thoughts, the practices, the kind of technology transfer we were involved was very vibrant in Bangladesh. And at the same time, the input market was to a large extent was actually market-based, which showed its efficiency also. The fertilizer market, though it controlled largely by the government, the production side, but the distribution side is through quite an efficient marketing system. It was distributed to many small shopkeepers or dealers. And that market was very highly competitive. We didn't have an issue for the last I think 8, 9, 10 years regarding fertilizer and other. So in this context, this COVID-19, it might have a serious blow in the coming days in the agricultural sector. Might have it. Why I'm saying it might? Till now, both on the supply side, on the demand side, at the moment, we don't see any significant adverse impact. But slowly on the demand side, we can see because many people are getting unemployed, and especially the workers in the garment sector and the micro entrepreneurs and many other wage workers. Even in the banking sector, they have started cutting down the salary of some of the banks. So the purchasing power of the people is dwindling. But as you know, these are the primary products. Still, though we don't see any impact on the demand for primary agricultural product, but there is a rise in the price in recent time. Maybe it is due to disruption in the transport sector. But in the long run, if the situation prolongs, then it will have it might have a disastrous impact on the demand side, which will have a subsequent negative impact on the supply side as well. So that's why, and it is very difficult for anybody to forecast what will be the situation in the coming days. We can apprehend so many things. So nevertheless, let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst. We are preparing now. Number one, we were working on technology transfer. We are thinking of using distance learning methodology for imparting this kind of training, demonstration, and other things, like the way we used to show field demonstration through study tours and other things. The distance learning method by using YouTube or this kind of things, this might replace the dissemination part of the technology transfer efforts. At the same time, the input market, maybe we can use the online based input marketing system so that people have got access to market related information regarding various kind of inputs. Includes seed, fertilizer, pesticides, and seedlings and whatnot. And then another interesting thing, we are showing, we are seeing some symptoms of a surge of new breed of entrepreneurs in Bangladesh, which are, you can call them kind of mini Amazon marketeers. They're following kind of Amazon style of marketing. They've got some kind of warehousing system in Dhaka or the big cities, and they are importing different kinds of agricultural products to meet the demand of from the rural areas to meet the demand of the demand in the urban sector. And the packaging will be a very big issue because they have to maintain the packaging system. They have to maintain the COVID-19 protocols. And then we need a system of couriering system so that we can track and trace, and the logistics management system, because the transport system have got seriously affected. At the same time, in the context of COVID-19, the packaging, at the same time delivery and the environment of the storage within the vehicle has to be COVID-19 compliant. So these are the challenges we are facing. And regarding risk mitigation, for the last about 10 years, government was not very keen in Bangladesh for crop insurance. On livestock insurance, we have got some intervention. We have got one of the cheapest microinsurance products. I will not say microinsurance product because legally in PKS we cannot call it microinsurance. We call it risk mitigation service. Very cheap, very effective. But in the field of crop insurance, we have got very limited interventions, not mention worthy, because government wanted to work on reducing the sources of risk so that we can offer affordable insurance to the farmers. So that's why the focus was on reducing the various kind of risks of the farmers. So we worked on smoothening the marketing channels. At the same time, the input market, we made it very competitive. The collectors market in Bangladesh is very competitive. The farm gate price as percentage of final consumer price in Bangladesh, it is from 56% to 70% in some places, which is, we think is very good in Bangladesh. on an average, there is fluctuation, and sometimes during the peak season of harvest, the price goes down, the ratio also goes down. But on an average, this is the ratio. So this pandemic actually disrupted all these things, and we are working, we have devised 14 protocols so that everybody from the market to the collectors market to the in the AROTs, you understand, the wholesale market, and every places, and the retailers market, we can follow those kind of protocols. For example, some people started thinking of having market police, so that, I mean, they can oversee this. These are kind of community police. They will look after whether everybody is maintaining in the market the COVID-19 protocols, the social distancing, and the customers are not crowding very densely on those things. So these, I think, these are the things we are on. The climate change adaptation, I think we implemented a number of very good projects, community climate change projects, which were praised globally. But the problem is, again, I mean, we have to get back to pre-COVID situation, because many of the activities cease to exist at the moment, because in some areas there are lockdowns, some area there are holidays, kind of, you can call it kind of loose lockdowns. And so as a ripple effect, everybody is affected. So I will wrap up as that getting back to the normal situation, pre-COVID situation will be the greatest incentive we can provide to the small and marginal farmers. And in order to do that, we have to follow the protocols we have devised in the context of COVID-19. And in order to do that, we have to have a concerted effort between the government agencies and the social organization at the same time, because the social organizations are they've got comparative advantage in building the social awareness, and government can create a macro environment. So but there is ample scope to make that concerted effort in Bangladesh. We have got many things to do still now in order to make that coordinated and concerted effort in Bangladesh. We have got some way to go. I will stop here, and if there is any question, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, Fazlul Bhai. And thanks for highlighting the very important aspect of working together and at different levels, governments, PPPs, using the social infrastructure existing, using the political infrastructure and the political will to drive various aspects. So thanks for highlighting that and the role that grassroots level organizations can play on it. So before we move on to the next section, which focuses essentially on what are the risk mitigation mechanisms currently available, I think let's take up a couple of questions that have been coming in and respond to some of those answers, some of those issues that are there. So we have a question for you, Boyan, which essentially focuses on, now that you have been looking at, you mentioned insurance and how it's been going. So your quick views on how can smallholder farmers be impacted by what is currently being called meso-level insurance, or insuring organizations such as Oxfam rather than the farmers directly. So any quick views on that? And we will certainly discuss more of it when we talk about the risk mitigation mechanism in the next section. So I'm using this as a transit point from there. Over to you, Boyan.
Thank you. Quick reply is there is no finite number of models for insurance. The key point is how do we reach affordable and reliable insurance. Meso insurance is one of the models. I believe that our colleagues in Oxfam Bangladesh is also testing this. And that seems to be working well for them. Again, having in mind scale that we can achieve in Sri Lanka and the scale that we can have in Bangladesh, that also kind of guide the model that you're going to apply. But the great thing is that any model can be, the beautiful thing about new technologies is you can easily customize it to different contexts and environments. So I don't know if that replies, but it's worth exploring.
Thanks, Bernd. Thanks, Bernd. Yes, we will continue to experiment in this vast field. And there's another question that comes in that, again, looks at smallholder farmers and how can their incomes be increased. So are there any cases that you have seen where, and when I say you, I'm referring to the entire panel here, that has seen the marginalized or the smallholder farmers into commercial farming? So what have they been motivated and encouraged and incentivized to enter commercial farming? Any example that you may have, Shyamji?
Maybe sort of Fazlul might have better views, but one thing Pranabji, that has had an astounding success in South Asia has been Bangladesh's experiments with fish. I mean, the fish production productivity, the consumption, and the distribution went so well. Honestly, it's almost impossible to believe that we could do so much. So we have really good examples where the one thing, Pranav, sometimes we blame the farmers. They are not responsive. They are very substance oriented. But when I was a representative of India, we launched a program because the pulses become a big issue and India became a captive, buyer from Canada and Australia. So we said, well, let's launch a big program. And 1 year, there were 6 billion tons produced in one single year. I mean, just not being much, a little bit of marketing thing. And that mostly in the dryland areas of Jharkhand and Bihar and eastern UP, the most difficult area so-called to operate. So when a concerted effort with some kind of clear objective and focus with political commitment is done by the public sector, we have seen in India, and when the civil society-led program along with the farmers, the responsible farmers in fisheries in Bangladesh was less of a government thing. It is much more the people and the non-government organizational commercial borrowers. We do have examples. I mean, not only income of the small farmers have gone up, but in Bangladesh, a large part of the nutrition issue has also been sorted, kind of addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Shyamji. I think we'll get other views also around this as we move along. But let's quickly see if we can try and unmute some of the participants because they seem to be having very interesting questions and it'll be good to have them talking. So good to have Swapnil Soni with us. He's with Score Re in Zurich and focusing on the Indian sector. Can we unmute Swapnil and ask the question from him, please? Swapnil, over to you.
Hello?
Yes, Swapnil, go ahead.
Sir, I think you can hear me, but somehow I cannot hear myself again, but I'm going ahead with the question. So I heard Mr. Khadka talked about Green Revolution and Mr. Kulanzika and Mr. Kadir spoke about insurance. I have a question regarding insurance per se. So insurance, usually we look at it as a risk mitigation tool, but I think it has a bigger role to play, particularly, for example, in productivity enhancement. So insurance, of course, gives the farmers a safeguard and the confidence to go ahead and, for example, use high inputs and invest in technology, which goes in the direction with what Mr. Khadke was saying. And in many developed countries, we have seen products which are specifically working on this, for example, margin insurance, margin protection plans. So is this something which the panelists would think might be something which might work in countries in Southeast Asian countries. Other thing regarding insurance is that in many countries, insurance is being used to as a tool to navigate the agri policies of the governments. For example, promoting biodiversity, promoting less water using crops. In the state of Haryana last year, they used this very interestingly to use insurance as a mechanism to promote farmers to cultivate maize instead of paddy. But I think the examples like these are very handful. So can insurance be something which can help in this direction, or is there any traction in any of these countries in this direction?
Great. Thanks for these questions, Swapnil. Before asking the panel to respond, I think let's hold this question and go through the next section, which actually deals with insurance and how it's been dealt with globally, and then we'll ask both Shyamji and Fazlul to respond once we've heard with what Matthew and Mohsin have to talk about. So thank you very much. There are similar questions on the productive side of insurance from Moin also in Bangladesh. So let's club those questions together and come back to them quickly. So let's move on, because this provides a nice transition point for us on the role and the various risk mitigation mechanisms that are available globally to understand how can they help in actually improving the role and productivity and incomes of the smallholder farmers. So let me at this stage invite Syed Mohsin Ahmed, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Pakistan Microfinance Network, and has been dealing with these members on a lot of these aspects of interplay between microcredit, microinsurance, what takes the lead, what drives what. So it'll be interesting to hear from him on how things are in Pakistan and overall views on the activities that are being carried over there. And then we'll respond to Swapnil's and other questions focused on insurance. So over to you, Mohsin, to take us through the activities there.
Thank you, Prashad. And I'm grateful to the host also for inviting me and hearing views from Pakistan. Since I am a network, so I will be sharing with you not the field level issues, but the more higher level policy issues and some headline information also. So as a sector, we are talking about close to 7.2 million active borrowers, which is very low compared to some of the other countries in South Asia, especially India and Bangladesh. Around 9.5 million insurance clients, around 45 million deposit clients for the microfinance outreach in Pakistan. In terms of our insurance market, majority of the insurance service, if I bucket them, is in health insurance, and a very small percentage is for crop and livestock insurance. As an industry, if you ask me where are some of the challenges, and so one of the biggest challenges not only providing life cycle event insurance, but also providing crop and livestock insurance services. And that is a lot to do with the fact that for the life cycle insurance, some of the major expenses, especially at the lower end of the market, is for marriage and higher education of the children. So, and that service is not available. The service that is available is health, and that is available is credit life largely. If I come back to especially crop and livestock insurance, there have been a number of projects. And they've been few and far between. So like, for example, State Bank has a crop and livestock loan insurance program, which is administered by the Central Bank of Pakistan, and it's a budgetary support that comes from the federal budget, and it covers some of the larger crops, the cash crops for Pakistan being paddy and wheat, but also maize and I guess barley also is part of this insurance coverage. However, this has the scheme is such that it covers 3 times the insurance premium, and the insurance premium is that you have to pay is 2%, and so there is it's really not been able to fly especially for the microfinance sector, given that for the microfinance sector it is available for the banking industry and not for the non-bank sector, given that central bank in Pakistan only regulates the banking, the deposit taking entities. And also that it is not for the smallholder farmers. So so majority of the smallholder farmers don't produce those crops. They produce some of the other crops like chana and chickpeas, or some of the vegetable crops, which is not covered in this scheme. Similarly, the livestock insurance project requires some operational details, which is very difficult for our members. Like, for example, the geocarding of the livestock, or like ensuring that how do you ensure that the reason for death of a particular livestock is due to a particular factor, or it has that event has happened or not. And so again, it's the marginal scheme which is not really going forward. Then there is another program that was initiated by the Pakistan Microfinance Investment Company, which is an apex like PKSF in Bangladesh, or maybe SIDBI in India, but it's now a spun off of the Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. So it's a specialized microfinance entity that has been created. And so they, under a project from, I think, and it goes back to when they were PPAF, from IFAD, they started a pilot scheme for crop insurance, which was linked to weather indexation. I think something that they followed the basics model, that's the model they were trying to replicate. And also the livestock insurance program. Somehow, in their view, they were not able to, the evidence suggests that they were not able to, this didn't work for weather indexation, because the number of weather centers in Pakistan is limited, and so the kind of data that was required to do the indexation was very limited, and so it required a lot of capital investment so that we have more number of weather stations available to collect that data. However, for the livestock insurance, this was a more successful scheme. And they then, with 2 or 3 of their partner organizations, took it beyond pilot and did provide livestock insurance coverage against livestock mortality. And what they found out was that a large number of microcredit borrowers got the benefit of this scheme. However, again, shifting this from a I would say a particular niche area to scaling it up at the national level has not happened. And for that, to my knowledge, PMIC is also looking for some more support. They've even taken it to the agriculture, the rural credit committee of the central bank, to present it and to also have it have some subsidy available for that.
Mohsin,
yeah.
Before you proceed, can you just adjust your camera? We've kind of lost you. We can see your wonderful tie, but not your. Yes, this is wonderful. Please go ahead.
No, it's okay. Okay. So as PMN, what we have been looking at is, what we've seen is that in the absence of agricultural insurance, a large-scale agricultural insurance in the country, and given the kind of crises we are facing, so I will go from 2005. So it was the earthquake in 2005, 2010 we had the Indus River overflowing. Then in 2012 we have very high intensity of rain in rural Sindh, which doesn't happen. In 2016, we had drought, which was followed again in 2018. And this year, not only the pandemic, but the locust attack, which the locust swarms, which are coming from Iran and all the way moving into our eastern borders on the eastern side of India, the western side of India also. And so these two together are creating huge problems. And given that Pakistan, when was going through its macroeconomic adjustment and the COVID crisis, for the first time, I think in 70 years, we have a negative growth rate. But thanks God, we had a positive agriculture growth rate. So given this context, we think what is very important, and that is something we've been discussing with a number of stakeholders, whether that is the World Bank or whether it is the government of Ministry of Finance, is the availability of a disaster risk fund. We think having some marginal schemes maybe at the pilot level will work, but if we want to link larger financial inclusion, given the context of climate change also, it is imperative that some investment needs to be made at the public policy level, whether by the government of Pakistan or by some donor agencies, so that we have a fund available which can hedge future risks against climate effect. And I don't know whether pandemic will happen again or not. This happens in 100 years, but I don't know. But these are now very new things that are happening in our markets. And so if we want to take that further risk, and let me also remind you that we are not that risk takers, a country like we've seen in Bangladesh or India. And so if we want to promote financial inclusion in the context of especially credit services, it is very important that this kind of a disaster risk fund is made available for the microfinance sector in Pakistan. And so we think that the interplay of insurance industry and of microfinance industry in creating that fund, where they are able to come up with a larger pool of we are able to provide the insurance companies a larger pool of clients, and the insurance industry is willing to as a platform of or a consortium come up with some kind of products which covers drought, floods, heavy rainfall. I don't know pandemic or not, but is important, and that increases the cost and the premium. And so that's where we think some sort of public fund is essential, though our members are willing to cover the premium around it. But that will increase, to us, that will increase the availability of credit and also enhance productivity at the marginal levels. So that's my views.
Thanks, Mohsin, and for setting across a kind of a, I shouldn't call it alternate financing plan, but a plan to actually take care of such unprecedented events as we are facing right now and safeguard the interests of the grassroots level, not just the people at the grassroots level, but also organizations dealing with them. So I think that's important. And some of these activities and some of this wonderful interplay between credit and insurance that you mentioned, and not just credit and insurance, but the entire risk mechanisms and the risks that are faced by the public are being dealt with in in certain programs across the globe. And for that, let me invite Matthew Dubell to share some of those global examples with us, which will have lessons for all of us here in Asia. Matthew works with the World Food Program based out of Rome and has spent a number of years working also with MFI NGO organizations such as Planet Guarantee, and then looking at different aspects within the World Food Program, and currently drives a very innovative program that World Food Program has been pushing not just in Africa, but also in Asia. So over to you, Matthew, to show us how integration can perhaps work and offer some of the solutions. Over to you, Matthew.
Well, thank you, Pranav, and good afternoon, everyone. Maybe Anuj, if you can move to the next slide, please. So I'm going to present our experience in the R4 initiative, which is a rural resilience initiative. And well, we can go to the next slide already. That is specifically targeting food insecure households. Just for the sake of history, this initiative has been developed jointly with Oxfam America since 2011 and started in Ethiopia. And now is currently being implemented in 7 African countries with like a very strong rapid expansion inside and outside of Africa, including Bangladesh, where we're actually introducing with WRMS flood index insurance. So I'm actually very happy to be presenting our experience and to also like be able to exchange a little bit outside of the African context. So basically, the offer approach, and I'm maybe going to talk a little bit less about insurance as such, because we don't believe that insurance is, as a standalone, completely efficient. It's very good for targeting the most infrequent shocks, those who are really impacting the most the vulnerable communities. But insurance works very well when it's well integrated and articulated with other risk management tools. So the whole scheme is usually connected with social safety nets or risk reduction mechanisms and programs. So for instance, we do work on asset creation, and farmers, for instance, build stone bunds to protect water ponds and lowlands from sand invasion, to increase infiltration of rainwater and to reduce water erosion. That's an example. And they can actually add a few more days on these risk reduction activities to pay the premium for the insurance product. In terms of risk reduction, we also do other types of activities, such as the application of conservation agriculture, for instance, in Zambia, which is actually very good because it's a good partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture and other UN agencies such as FAO, where we help them expanding the number of farmers who can then improve the soil fertility, the water retention, but also their productivity. And then these two components, insurance and risk reduction, are actually also articulated with saving activities. That is very important in terms of managing keeping the risk, retaining the risk for the medium shocks and the idiosyncratic shocks, but also investing a little bit, and the risk reserves, which is partly accessing credit, but also just enhancing the investment carefully, but enhancing it. So today we reach about like 500,000 beneficiaries in these 7 African countries. And I must say, I'm very happy because despite the COVID crisis, we were trying to just maintain the volumes of the portfolios. And actually in a few countries, we're actually like doubling it, like in Ethiopia, where we're going from 30,000 to more than 60,000. In Malawi, we're also opening new countries like Bangladesh or Mozambique. So I think it's actually very positive. I just would like to mention that in terms of technologies, we also try to connect these 4 tools with other tools on which WFP is working, such as training on post-harvest loss management, for instance, or access to climate services through very simple tools like the radio, or through more advanced tools through mobile technology. Can we go to the next slide, please? So on this one, I just wanted to show you that we use different types of technologies at different steps. When we're working with very vulnerable households who are very much food insecure, sometimes they cannot, they're even like labor constraints, so they just need unconditional transfer, food or cash transfers. But as soon as they can actually work, we start building their resilience by introducing proactive asset creation, by introducing food assistance and insurance, which is really like one of the first tools we're introducing. And then as long as we're increasing their capacity to be resilient to climate shocks, we increase their investment capacity by introducing saving groups, informal credit groups as well, and then their productivity. So we try to improve their access to improved inputs, to quality inputs, to access to the market as well, and to climate services, for instance. And we go to increasing the inputs so that they can actually like be structured around like cooperatives, for instance, and sell to bigger off-takers until they can be fully graduated because they're food secure and they no longer need any transfer from WFP or any social protection system. Next slide, please. So, sorry, I just wanted to mention one quick thing about this approach. This approach is that because we're working with food insecure and vulnerable households, they don't have the capacity to afford the premium in cash. So they pay with their labor by applying these risk reduction measures. But over time, as we're building their resilience, we introduce a cash contribution from the farmers, and every year we increase that. So on average, we're between 25 and 30% of cash contribution right now with the most advanced countries. But obviously this year, because of the COVID crisis, which is not only because of the health impact, but mostly of the socio-economical impact, we decided to remove all the cash contribution for this year. But then we inform all the participants that next year they will have to catch up, hopefully, so that we can re-continue their graduation process. So through all the outcome monitoring and impact measurement that we've conducted in all the different R4 countries, what we can say is that first, this integrated approach is really improving resilience capacity to climate shocks, which is the primary goal that we're trying to build. But also we're managing to stabilize income and also the expenditures in terms of food input investment, but also access to school, which is very important, and also the type of livestock as well. We also improve the capacity to repay loans, which is very important because we always expect that insurance is unlocking access to credit, for instance, but obviously insurance cannot cover the whole amount of loan. And so it's really like the connection with the savings, for instance, that's really improving their capacity to repay loans. And that's very important. And at the same time, I think it's also one of the key challenges because obviously the number of people who do access insurance and who do produce any kind of crop or also like livestock, they don't all have access to microfinance because MFIs and banks overall don't have enough appetite, at least in most of the countries we're working in, for financing all the very small and vulnerable farmers, which is definitely something we're trying to work on. And that's the reason why we're also trying to build with the VSL groups, the village saving and loan groups, but also by structuring them around cooperatives, for instance, or farmers clubs. And the last point, which is also very important, and I think kind of the topic of this presentation, is the increased investment and the agricultural production. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show you 3 examples in 3 countries where we see that our participants have increased their investment and their agricultural production. So between 2015, which was the first year where we introduced the R4 approach in Malawi, and 2017, the production of maize, which is really like the staple crop in Malawi, has more than doubled, which is a very good example. And but most households did not sell during this period the maize because they prefer to store it for the future. That was like 57% of the respondent, or to consider, or they did consider not having any surpluses, which is interesting because like when you see that they're doubling, they're still not like confident enough to actually go to the market and sell it because their food security is still the most important thing. Then the example of Kenya is also like pretty interesting because we see that between the control groups and the R4 participants, and for the 5 types of crops that we're using, we see that there has been some decrease. Actually, no, there has been some increase. Sorry, but even when you see some decrease, the shock is much more is much lower for the R4 participants than for the control groups who are not using any of these technologies. So that's definitely very important. And in Zimbabwe, where we had in 2017 a very bad season, what we see is that despite this, the R4 participants did increase their total crop production, whereas the control groups actually decreased it slightly, but still. And that's very important because we think that insurance, where we did have a payout, has played a small role, but the overall confidence that we're building among the participants is also very important. Next slide, please. And so in addition, what I'd like to say is that the COVID crisis has definitely increased the need that we invest in technology in terms of education, but also in terms of insurance distribution, in terms of enrollment of our participants, in terms of our management of the VSL groups, for instance. So I've already like mentioned the context and the increase of our portfolios in the different countries. But definitely, we've been like investing a little bit more efforts in several countries in technology. So the first one is in Zambia, where we work with a mobile network operator to actually register all the participants to give for free SIM cards, which obviously for them is very interesting because they're just like enrolling new customers. But it allows us to now distribute much more quickly the insurance product without having to go to the field, which in the case of lockdown, very useful, and also to settle the claims very, very quickly as soon as the end of the season has been reached. So the Zambia case has been like very interesting, and the Zambian government is actually insuring around 1 million farmers, and WFP is providing technical assistance to the government to first improve the quality of the index that is currently being provided to these 1 million farmers, but also to improve some of the processes, including the distribution and the awareness raising through digital platforms. In Kenya, that's interesting, where we've been doing a lot of monitoring and evaluation at the end of every season. All the farmers were really asking us to no longer settle the claims through a bank account where they had to walk to the closest town, roughly between 1 and 2.5 hours, to wait there and to pay for getting the cash. They've been asking us to use M-Pesa, which is a very successful and widespread mobile banking system. And now that we've introduced it, it's actually like it has really increased the satisfaction of the participants. In Senegal, it's a little bit different. We were planning to introduce a digital platforms like in Zambia, but considering that there was only one single insurance company that is distributing agricultural insurance and index insurance, we actually decided to go for a sectorial approach and to try to cover all the different needs of the sector and to have like one tool using different channels, but like one digital platform that would be useful for all the farmers in the country, and so that we could be like much faster in terms of distributing the product, communicating and interacting with the clients, and also settling the claims in a safer way. Thank you. I hope I kept my presentation within 10 minutes.
Thanks, Matthew. And thanks for highlighting the role that insurance can actually play among a bouquet of services that are there, which is actually a good point for us to come back to what Swapnil had asked in saying that what is the productive role for insurance and how can insurance be used as a mechanism for changing behavior at the ground level and move towards greater productivity. We've all talked, we all think of insurance as a protective mechanism, but here you've seen how it can act as a productive mechanism too. So any quick feedback for Swapnil when he asked as to what are the ways in which insurance can be used to help change farming practices at the ground level?
So I have like two things. The first one is, so we really see insurance having three effects. The first one is indeed the protective aspect. We think it's also a promotive aspect where we promote the change of behavior in terms of applying risk reduction measures, for instance, and that's very important. And the transformative aspect, as I was saying, is really like unlocking the confidence to actually invest, but also the confidence for financial institutions to lend to the farmers who are being insured. And so what we've been trying to do is that when we can connect insurance with microfinance products, for instance, the insurance is primarily reimbursing the loan or part of the loan in case of a payout. It's never repaying 100%, obviously, and that's the reason why we always believe that there's still a little bit of production, and we also think that saving is very important. I just would like to tell like a very quick story in Senegal. It's not with WFP, it was actually like a USAID project where we're working with a cooperative of maize farmers. And they definitely saw that with all the communication that we're making in presenting the index and like the planting window, the duration of each of the phases and so on, they really like understood a little bit more how they could optimize their practices, how they could optimize the planting, and let's say statistically reduce their risk exposure. And so with that, they were really like saying, all the farmers of the cooperative have to plant during this specific window. All the farmers have to take insurance if they want to take a loan. And so we've seen a very strong increase of their productivity, of their production, of their structuration, so that they could actually like produce enough to be interesting for off-takers. And on that, I could share like the name of the project, which is like Natambai in Senegal. And that was like a very, very interesting impact of insurance there.
Thanks, Matthew. We've been getting a number of questions, so quickly, let's just quickly ask a couple of them, both insurance related, and get some of the audience also to share some of the views. There's a question for you, Fazlul Bhai, which comes from Bangladesh, of course, which says that what is the market share of smallholders in terms of production and supply of agriculture products in Bangladesh? How can smallholders can retain, sustain, and go ahead? What are the role that the MFIs can play in it? So it's essentially involved about how PKSF and other MFIs can help smallholder farmers play a more active role in the supply of products instead of just dealing through middlemen.
In Bangladesh, the small and marginal farmers, these are basically, they constitute the almost more than 90% of the total farmers of the country, because we don't have so-called big farmers in our country. Very few, and they don't have a very significant contribution as a separate segment of the farming community. So we are largely a bunch of, and the farming sector is largely dominated by small and marginal farmers. And interestingly, we have two nationalized commercial banks engaged in farming sector, and their performance is very poor, extremely poor. I don't want to mention, I mean, it's not worthy of discussing about them. This is not a very pleasant matter for me, but I have to say this. Apart from these two organizations, the government, especially the central bank, is providing incentive to the commercial banks through a refinancing mechanism that if they provide loan, at least they're bound to provide 2% of their total loan portfolio at the rural sector, especially in the farming sector. And then through refinancing, they'll get some incentive. In order to, if they do not do it, they will be punished in a way in terms of imposing some penalty on that. So commercial banks want to avoid that. In order to avoid that, they largely depend on the MFIs. They bulk finance the MFIs. I mean, so through MFIs, actually, they are complying with the instruction of the central bank. And in Bangladesh now, the MFI sector, in the total advance, the MFI's loan portfolio constitute about 8%, 7 to 8% in between of the total loan advances in the country, which was, I remember in 2000, just before 20 years, was less than 1%. So in that sense, this is a significant improvement, but there's a long way to go because the performance of this sector is extremely good. Over the last almost 3 decades, sustainably, the quality of loan portfolio was excellent by any world standard. And now the MFIs, MFIs have switched over to, from manual-based MIS system to now they have switched over to computerized system. And that has laid a foundation for now offering digital finance to the marginal farmers, micro entrepreneurs, and ultra poor people. And we have assessed in PKSF, and we found that within a maximum period, it may be less, within a maximum period of 1 year, we can switch over from manual-based financing to digital financing system because the infrastructure is there. The MFIs are equipped to do that. And at the grassroots level, the people are also through Bikash and many other money transferring systems. They're quite acquainted with mobile-based, cell phone-based financing system. And the digital financing system for the low-income population will surely, it will be based on this cell phone. So we call it in Bangladesh mobile financial service. So this will be done today. We had a meeting and we have decided in principle that we'll promote it on a more aggressive manner so that within 6 months, 7 months, we can switch over completely to digital financing system. It is possible, very much possible in Bangladesh. And this fits with the COVID, in the context of COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks, Fazlul. Thanks, Fazlul. I think that's a very nice way.
Just one point about the insurance. We want to switch over to an insured society. An insured society for us is to adhere to a set of standards. And we are trying to attain those standards in order to switch over from a non-insured society to an insured society. That's a dream, actually.
Thanks, Fazlul. This actually nicely points out the role that MFIs can play. So it's not that you're dealing with only a certain kind of people, but also the smallholders very much in the scope of things, not only for credit, but also for adoption and adaptation of technology. So thank you very much for that. We have some very interesting issues and we have very interesting people who are talking about it. And it's good to have Ajay Desai in the audience. Can we get Ajay Desai? And Ajay, if you are there, can you quickly tell us, you've been working in this sector for a long time and working with SHGs and developing them from a commercial bank's viewpoint also. So any quick insights that you have that may be useful for us all in understanding the effectiveness at the grassroots level?
See, in fact, I was asking that as a question also. There is COVID has created one opportunity by disrupting the marketing leg more as compared to the production leg and the consumption leg. So, can we leverage that opportunity? I'm seeing nearby, around me in Mumbai or in the cities in India, that for the first time, farmers groups are able to supply to consumers, urban consumers, using the package model, where they make a standardized package, a kit of all vegetables and deliver at predefined intervals. I would like to know from other participants also whether there are such examples of leveraging this disruption as an opportunity for small farmers.
Thanks, Ajay. Let's club one more question with it and then we'll quickly get the panel to respond. Do we have Manoj Karyat also there? Manoj, you can go ahead and ask your question about insurance for smallholders that you mentioned.
Yes, actually, we have seen that besides smallholders, many of the farms are cultivated by tenant and shareholder farmers in India. So there isn't any practical insurance coverage for these people. And another question is, so what my question is, what could be the practical approach to include these farmers, include the tenant and shareholder farmers within the insurance ambit? And another question is, one particular risk that is being faced by smallholder farmers in India is the risk of destruction by wild animals. So also there isn't any practical approach to deal with and cover that particular laws. So if anyone have any answers to these questions, I will be happy to know. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Manoj. Thanks, Ajay. So basically, any quick views from the panel, and perhaps Shyamji, some quick view from you on what Ajay talked about on this direct linkage with the farm, and Matthew and Boyan, if you could respond to Manoj's issue of the various risks that the formal channels may not be able to cover. But very quick inputs, 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Now, in India, yes, of course, the wild animals have become a big issue. And there's one case we become successful, which was about those nilgai, those blue bulls, because they were called nilgais. So basically, they are guy, they're cows. So basically, it was very difficult to deal with that. Finally, so I sat down with the Minister of Agriculture. We convinced them that, look, it's a pest. You call it a guy or mouse or whatever you call it. So that we were successful. That now nilgai can be sought at, and actually you can ask the government even to do that. One area, Pranavji, where we definitely didn't succeed was the monkeys. I was trying to push for the monkeys as well, but then that didn't work out. The monkey issue was too emotional. So, but we have to, we have to really come up with the terms on this at some point of time. It was not only in India. I'm seeing exactly the same problem in Nepal too.
Okay, so we'll need to see how we can do that. But Ajay's point of direct linkages, we all see that as an opportunity, and let's come back to it once we've heard what the farmers themselves are saying, and Sonu will have something to say to that. Matthew, any quick feedback for Manoj for covering these non-formal risks?
It's a tricky question. I would say that for me, the main problem is more, helping the farmers deal with like the constraint that they're facing, like access to inputs, improving their farming practices, access to market, which is probably impacting them much more than any other small risks. I mean, it's interesting in the example that Shyam was giving in Bangladesh, in Burkina Faso, for instance. The third risk are actually elephants who are actually destroying the crops. And on that, it's very difficult, of course, with an index insurance, unless we're doing every yield and the elephants are damaging the whole district. Well, it's going to be very, very difficult to capture. And on that front, that's again, my answer is that's the reason why we're having like other risk management tools, because insurance itself and index insurance even more, it can definitely not like cover all that.
Great. So basically the package that you have advocated and looking at different mechanisms in addition to insurance can help the farmers more in that sense is what I get from it. And we can see how it actually influences them on the ground level. So let us move on, and we have a lot of questions, so we'll kind of see how much we can get back to, and move on to Sonu Agarwal, who's the managing director and founder of Weather Risk Management Services, and has been doing a lot of work at the ground level for use of technology, for use of different farming mechanisms, and working with farming communities with his entire team. And he's got some interesting feedback from the farmers on various technologies, etc., that are being adopted. So it'll be good to hear from him what's happening on the ground level, what are the various opportunities that he sees and in working with the farmers for their adoption of technology, etc. Over to you, Sonu.
Thank you, Pranav. WRMS has been working in agricultural risk management since 2004. Next slide. So we carried out a small dipstick survey across various parts of India. In May 2020, we surveyed around 300 farmers in 3 different parts of the country: Northwest, Central India, East India. And 5 questions were asked. The first 3 are visible on the screen. The questions were: how have you benefited from new technology in farming recently? Are you aware of smart or digital farming? And why do you not invest in new agriculture technology? These were the first 3 questions. And the farmers across these regions acknowledge that they have benefited from technology. While it may not be digital or smart farming, which is relatively new to them, they have heard about it. They want to experiment with it, but they have in the past derived benefits using better seeds, drip irrigation facilities, planting techniques. So they are aware that technology, it could be of any form, it has capability to improve yields and their income. And so they are curious, I would say, about the new technologies which are coming in and want to experiment with it. But one of the constraints they have expressed, and this is true across regions, that they lack funds to experiment with new technologies. They do not have an assurance that if they adopt a new technology, because adopting a new technology means investing a little more. So they're not sure if they invest a little more, whether they would get adequate returns. And since they are short of funds, they are reluctant to invest in new technologies unless they see their peers adopting to new technologies. They are confident that yes, this new technology will work. And if there is any subsidy, if the cost of that new technology is brought down, then they are relatively more comfortable in adopting a new technology. Next slide, please. The 2 other questions we asked were: what new financial services have you taken recently? And do you get better prices due to better market linkages? And surprisingly, when it comes to financial services, farmers have not really, while our sample size is small to draw any conclusions on this matter, but by and large, the farmers have used the government Kisan credit card loans, and they have not availed other channels of finance. So microfinance services have really not reached out to farmers. Only 5% of farmers in central India were using microfinance services. So the new fintech services have really not yet reached farmers. They could be reaching other population segments in rural areas, but they have not really reached out to the farmers. And likewise, while there have been efforts on market linkages, but I think the efforts are too small or insignificant right now to have really impact on farmers' lives. Most of the farmers, have basically cited that they depend on government minimum support price. So, so what really happens? This survey, and we have been working in rural areas for a long time now. And what we have understood is that a small farmer is caught in a vicious cycle where, he has a low and volatile income, and that does not give him the confidence to invest in smart and sustainable technology. There are a host of new technologies which are available through which yields can be increased. But what really happens is that the farmer really is not confident, and so he really delays the adoption. As I said earlier, that unless he sees his peers adopting to new technologies, and unless he's very confident that this will work for him, he delays the adoption, and that delays the whole technology adoption cycle. And then this further leads to low agriculture productivity, the whole issue of climate change now affecting farmers. So facing so with these what should I say, lack of better technologies is not able to sustain the impact of climate change, and this leads to again low productivity. So this is the vicious cycle in which he's practically caught. And the banks or other forms of financial channels also don't support him, because they don't really see the farmer or the small landholder as a good risk. Of course, the government gives subsidized credit, but other forms of financial services do not extend credit because they don't see him as a good risk. So what we have been at WRMS trying for several years is, and we have started a new product very recently. What we do is that we guarantee a yield or an income to a small landholder. We say that, okay, if you use this new technology, which we are confident that if he uses, that would lead to improved yields, then what we say is that if you follow as a farmer these better technologies, I'll guarantee you a yield, and this guaranteed yield is sufficient to cover the investment in the new technology, which the farmer has to make. This also gives the confidence to the bank or other financial channels to give credit to the farmer that, okay, if there is this guarantee that the farmer will make this much of yield and there is a market linkage so he can get assured price, then I'm also interested in financing him. So this guarantee, what we have seen in some of our pilots, we have seen helps farmer break that vicious cycle where he's able to invest in better, smart and sustainable farming technologies and is able to improve his yield. Next slide, please. So a small example, this is a pilot we did in Bengal for 3 years. So here the farmers are covered, for a minimum yield of 8 ton per acre, and this is the farm yield and not an area yield. And the farmer is advised to take or undertake, a package of practice which would help in improving the yields. And if he follows that package of practice, then the guaranteed yield increases. So if, for example, he does soil treatment, his guaranteed yield increases by 200 kilogram per acre. So the base yield is 8,000 kg per acre. But if he does soil treatment, if he applies the right dose of fertilizers, then the yield which we guarantee him increases. And so this increasing yield, so for example, if I guarantee him 1 ton more yield if he adopts all the better practices, that 1 ton yield will ensure that the farmer will get back the return on his investments which he have to make in adopting to this new technology. So this gives the assurance to the farmer that I can invest in technology. It gives assurance to the local bank. No, please remain on the previous slide. This gives confidence to the banks that they can co-invest in this. But this is just the base layer. You cannot increase yields just by a form of insurance. You have to really do the hard work. You have to really apply all the agriculture technologies, help the farmer in, with the best of seeds, help in irrigation, help in pest and disease management. So all the agriculture science then comes, and ensures that we can give a better yield. So while the insurance part could be the base layer, but this alone is not sufficient. You have to really use the best of agriculture sciences, blend them all, and give that as a package to the farmer. That's something which we have learned. Next slide. Yeah, so this is a case study from Haryana where basmati rice is grown, and over the years, what we have seen is the farmer who used to get 22 quintals per acre, and this is not like a steady yield which he used to get. It could fluctuate year on year based on the weather situation, based on the pest and disease attack. He could increase his yield using these better technologies to 26 quintal per acre, and he could grow pesticide residue free basmati rice, which he could also export, which also resulted in better price. So his net income, improved by a certain amount, which was enough to take care of the extra costs which went into growing or in adopting this new technology. So his cost of cultivation increased by 3,000 rupees per acre, but the income improved much more. And there was an environmental cost which was also reduced. He started using less water, less pesticides, which also has impact on sustainability aspects. And there are many such examples. Next slide. During COVID, we further extended this plan and customized it to the requirement of the farmers. So along with the yield guarantee, we started giving a kit of seeds and agrochemicals, weedicides, which the farmer could require during the production cycle. The idea was that he should have all the material with him so that in case there is a lockdown or the markets are closed, then still he has all those kits available. We also included a component of price assurance where, what we have done for soybean farmers is that we are coming up with a contract where the price risk also will be hedged, since some of these commodities are tradable on the commodity exchanges. So what we have done is, while we hedge, we use the commodity exchanges to hedge our price risk, but to the farmer, he's given a price cover also. So he has a base yield guarantee, but he also has a minimum price guarantee. So it's an income guarantee for him as a whole. And in case of horticulture crops, what we have done is we have tied up with appropriate procurement companies, and so that so a fixed price can be offered to the farmer. In many cases, we are not able to get an appropriate market linkage, but what we have tried to do is that using our network, across India, we try to get the best price for the farmer in such situations and ensure that the farmer gets a base income. And on top of it, what we have done is that to take care of COVID, so we have also added a health cover. So what it does is that it gives the farmer an assurance that in case he or his any family member is affected by COVID, or not only COVID, any other disease, then the hospitalization expenses will be covered. There is a telemedicine teleconsultation application also given to the farmer on his mobile phone, through which he can consult doctors. So we have tried to add these three layers together during the COVID crisis, and have started offering these to farmers. This is still work in progress. We have started work with cotton farmers. We are going to add soya and two pulse farmers also very shortly. What we are also able to do is that in many villages we have seen the laborers, urban laborers migrating back, and we have been able to use some of them to help us with the extension work in the field. So while it's still an insignificant number, but we are planning to hire more and more laborers who have returned back and have started using them for providing extension services or monitoring services in the field for this. So I'll stop here, and what I just want to to conclude with is a statement that while insurance can incentivize definitely, but it has to be a complete package if you want to improve productivity. It's not just insurance, which will, many of the risks are so high that the insurance costs are very high. It's non-implementable. But if you integrate it with the best of agriculture sciences, then the insurance risk also comes down, and you can create a package which can be relevant for the farmers and of less cost to the government and other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Ono, and for highlighting the fact that it's a bouquet of services that will actually work rather than each one individually. And I think we've covered a lot of ground in which we've said earlier also that it's not just one stakeholder that can play a role, but multiple stakeholders who can play a role in actually bringing about not just productivity increases at the ground level, but also dealing with current situations, current challenges, and try and convert them into opportunities. So we are, just for the audience's sake, we are technically out of time, but we have extended the webinar by about 20 minutes to take some of the questions that you have been asking and some of the interesting aspects that have been come up. So thank you very much for your continued participation and your patience. And without wasting too much of time, let me quickly come back to one of the aspects that has been there and ask Vijayji to respond to it. Vijayji, you started out by saying that agriculture will lead the recovery, and we are getting both schools of thought from the audiences. Ajay Desai mentioned it as an opportunity for direct contact between the farmers and the buyers that he mentioned. And some of the others are talking about the supply chain breaking down because of the issues that are currently being faced. So let me put this conundrum right in your lap and hear what you want to share on this aspect of the opportunity for the supply chains to play a more creative role in this entire process. Vijayji, you have to unmute yourself.
The crisis is so widespread that almost any statement can be made about any part of it. So while it is true that in some places the supply chains have sustained, others they have broken down, and both the statements are true. But I was talking about a more general picture, and there what I'm saying is, and in fact the same point was highlighted by a couple of other speakers, that both the demand side and the supply side of agriculture has broadly remained intact. And it's the only sector in the economy where that is so, as compared to manufacturing, even services, even digital services have got, except the essential services have got impacted, for example, software development and so forth. So as a result, this is the sector which will lead the growth. Now, how can we use this opportunity to fix the supply chain to a more desirable type of model? See, there has been this long view that disintermediation will make the supply chain more efficient, that the so-called middleman is the problem, and there's a long chain of middlemen. But in practice, any attempts to remove those chains have not really been greatly successful, either in terms of quantity or in terms of reducing costs, overall transaction costs. The real issue has been the certain regulatory frameworks, such as the APMC Act in India, and the restrictions on movements of commodities across even district boundaries, forget about state boundaries. So once, in India, at least 3 ordinances have been adopted, which are purporting to reduce these restrictions significantly. And that then will enable, using the combination of digital communications, transnational logistics or interstate logistics, and financial payments service, which can be used almost around the country. So due to these 3 reasons, now you can see a new possibility of a more efficient supply chain. But with, I would like to emphasize, it must have private sector participation, because to pretend that government or producer cooperatives, which are still very small and not everywhere, that they can replace the well-established private sector supply chain is probably not correct.
Thanks, Vijay. Matthew, just we'd like to pick your brain on one thing. There are lots of questions coming in about adoption of technology at the ground level and if there are successful examples there. Sonu's just shared some of the views that farmers have given feedback on. So what is your feedback on use of this entire technology? You mentioned M-Pesa being a facilitator. Any other such successful technologies that you can share? And then I'll request Boyan to share his views on this too.
Well, I think that the distribution of insurance through the mobile network operator, it's with MTN in Zambia, is actually like a very successful approach. But overall, it's a bit difficult to answer that because I think that we've been working in a way very manually from the beginning because, well, basically the infrastructure was not really there, and the adoption by farmers of mobile banking tools was very limited, except in Kenya because it's actually like a very specific example, this M-Pesa. But for instance, in Ethiopia, where we have our biggest portfolio, and in Malawi, where we have our second largest portfolio, mobile banking solutions and just like digital solutions are still extremely underdeveloped, or handled by the state, which means that actually we don't really have like a lot of options. And well, those companies are also maybe not the most open-minded to these new technologies. So I would say that on the digital front, no, it's not like very good. But I just would like to mention one super interesting example in Madagascar. GIZ has developed an education game through mobile technology, where farmers can call and answer like a few questions. And they were targeting a few thousands of farmers, and it has reached more than several tens of thousands. And well, farmers have really like started to be educated about agricultural microinsurance, and this is really like preparing the market for better adoption. We're introducing this year, so hopefully it will actually work.
Okay, that's great. Boyan, in your diverse experience, the adoption of technology for overall farming improvement, any issues, challenges that you would like to talk about?
I'll be very positive about it. I think it's possible. I think it's absolutely needed. I don't think it should be project solved. It would be really good to see much more entrepreneurship initiative and recognition of business opportunities in providing different solutions throughout the value chain, because we tend to be very linear to look at production, access to finances, and customer, while the number of services that can be treated, and I think Sonu described quite a few of them in his presentation, as a business opportunity itself. So changing the perspective, I think, would kind of allow us to harness the potential and bring more actors in the market, not trying to replace the existing one, but to diversify the offer and bring better conditions for the customers and clients.
Great. Lots of questions at the ground level. We have Ali Tariq from Bangladesh online who's wanting to understand more about insurance. Tariq, are you there? So if you could share your question very briefly and then the panel can respond. Over to you, Ali Tariq.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just asking that in some cases during the COVID-19 situation, we have been facing that in some cases, in case of cattle insurance, we need to, for claim monitoring, we need physical verification. And also for yield assessment, we need physical movement, which is very much tough at this moment. And we cannot connect to the farmers as well at this moment directly based on the awareness and the other ground scenario. So what would be the best solution at this moment? Because maybe this will be new normal for a couple of years, maybe. We don't know what will be the end. So what to do with this, how to deal with this, or any significant cases which globally are proven or already tested that it can be implemented in this situation.
Thanks, Tariq. Let me combine this with a couple of other questions that have been coming around theme of outreach, and ask that generally what is, for this penetration and awareness to happen, is it good to go through to individual farmers, or can farmer clusters and farmer groups be approached? Is there a difference in outcomes that the panel would see if we approach individually or to groups, or any examples, other examples that the panel has in building outreach and building awareness for technology and for various other mechanisms through groups or through individuals?
Well, maybe I can just like give a quick one. We used to work mostly with groups because we had to regroup them to first do the saving groups, but also regroup them to actually open a banking account so that we could collect the cash contribution and settle the claims. But now that we're using technology and especially mobile banking, we have a more individual interaction with the participants. That being said, I'm still very much convinced that to build awareness, to answer questions, to also be efficient, the group approach is still like very useful.
Can I provide a few thoughts on that? We are doing group approach as well purely because of transactional costs. So we are not dealing with 20 policies, but we are dealing with one. And then this one is designated on 20 farmers and clearly stipulates terms and conditions. However, as we are developing technology to make digital onboarding, we can see that individual approach is going to be possible because we can decrease the costs equally. Thank you.
Fazlul, since you also deal with a large group, I mean, it's a large outreach that you have through these. And we had earlier questions around meso level coverages and covering at the secondary level, so to say. You've also been very successful in dealing with various organizations such as Bcash and other technology related issues. So any insights that you'd like to share with the participants on what approach to take for quicker and better adoption as well as adaptation of technology at the grassroots level?
The basic principle is the same. We have to solve a common problem through technology. And at the same time, the potential of adopting that technology by the general mass have to be very high. So in case of Bangladesh, the cell phone based solutions are the best because the cell phone penetration is very high. At the same time, people are familiar now with a significant portion of the people are familiar with Bikash and other, especially Facebook-based systems. And in Bangladesh, e-commerce is not taking off that much, but Facebook-based marketing is taking off very much. There is a surge of Facebook-based marketing in Bangladesh, and which is doing pretty well. But the tracing and quality control is a problem. As you know, this kind of private initiatives emerge, this kind of things happen. But I think very quickly we have to help this new breed of entrepreneurs in maintaining the quality and many other solutions they need to solve some common problems. As I have mentioned earlier, couriering system and the logistics management, tracing, tracking system, this kind of solutions, which are very much available. But as they are small entrepreneurs, So they individually, they're not aware of many kinds of solutions. So somebody, some apex organization like PKSF can come forward to solve these problems. And we have started working on this with the help of IFAD and World Bank also recently. And I think we'll make some breakthrough very quickly. On insurance, I have one thing, because we have a large, very huge risk mitigation service. Debt insurance, we are providing debt insurance to about 15 million households in Bangladesh. So if somebody dies, automatically the debt is waived and they get 5 times the amount of their savings money. This is inbuilt with the microfinance system. And in the livestock, we have given livestock insurance service to about 3 million cows so far. And this is very interesting. What we did through some development interventions, we reduced the mortality of cow by 70%. And by doing that, we made the insurance service affordable by the marginal farmers. And as a result, with $3, with $3 premium, we can settle a claim of about $450 very sustainably. And with the premium money, we are meeting all the expenses of development services, including the claim settlement charges. And even then, after doing that, we are making about 30% margin on that. So you can imagine. So it's all about, I mean, attaining some standards, especially the agricultural good practice, livestock good practice. So in order to do that, we have to work on reducing the risks first. And by doing that, we can make the insurance services affordable to the farmers. So that's the essence of our risk mitigation service. We have a huge risk mitigation service, but our vision is slowly but steadily we'll switch over to an insured system.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. On this positive note, let me thank all the panelists as well as the participants for their views. We have a lot of questions and I'm sure we'll get to them and hopefully respond to a lot of them as well as put it on the website so that we have all the participants' issues being responded to. So thank you very much to all the participants for their active participation and keeping us on our toes with all the questions that are there. We've tried to cluster some of them and respond to them while we've discussed, but the ones that we missed out, we will certainly get back to you on that. Before we close the webinar, I think it's only appropriate that the panelists who've very patiently provided their inputs to this entire panel are able to say one line of closing remarks on where they see this sector moving and the benefits and or otherwise that can actually be highlighted. So I'd request each panelist to say one sentence in what they feel is required in this sector at this stage. Let's start with you, Vijayji. One line from you.
Well, first of all, thank you. And it was wonderful, I think, to hear from the experience of so many of our neighboring countries. It's quite understandable that we share many problems and there are also some very specific problems. But I think the two things that I take away from here is that the basic pre-COVID problems of the need to improve productivity and to contain risk. I think that there are some significant pilots and technology applications available. So I think it's if we can spread those, and if the government and the state extension systems also adopt those, the crop insurance systems adopt those, then they will get embedded rather than remaining, cute experiments outside the system. The second thing is that for the value chain, the supply chain, on the way out, that is for the produce, the primary procurement and the first stage processing to be done by farmers' organizations is a very good idea everywhere. But thereafter, the supply chain can be a hybrid of combination of private sector, traders, agro-business companies, and of course the traditional supply chain. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed
Thanks,
this.
Vijayji.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vijayji. Over to you, Shyamji, your 1 minute on what all you've heard and where you see it going.
Yeah. One thing, this COVID-19, I have become very hopeful, colleagues, is, we are suddenly made to realize the vulnerability of not only of individual communities, entire humanity. So I'm sure there will be much more interest in future about being, otherwise so far we're very confident. We have done so, we have produced so much, we have done this, we have done that. But I think we will we'll come over that and try to actually think a bit longer term. And then, the similar kind of crisis can come up anytime. There are 3,200 coronaviruses all over the world. So I think in that, that's a positive thing too. Suddenly we become aware of the, total ecosystem in which we live. So, and the human ingenuity is always on work. So we will find, and the important thing is that we should, do something like this very often so that we don't spend our own time reinventing the wheel. And the Excel program would actually, make the learning much faster and our response could be quicker. Over to you, Pranavji.
Thank you, Shyamji. That's an extremely positive handover. Matthew, your views on where we see the adoption and smallholder farmers benefiting?
I think I would build on what Shyam just said. For me, we need to have more preparation between the government level, but also the communities and individuals. And so we need to better articulate the different tools. Right now, we're having microfinance, microinsurance, some value chains who are more or less structured, and then we're having the humanitarian sector with forecast-based financing or sovereign insurance, and all that is, and even more tools, and all that is fairly not very well aligned because a lot of governments still don't have a good strategy on, how they let the private sector take care of one thing, how they can strengthen their shock responsive social protections, where not only for natural catastrophes, but also indeed for pandemics. And I think we're realizing that a little bit better now. So we need to build it. Thank you very much.
Coordination amongst various stakeholders is the need of the hour, according to you. Thank you. Boyan, what are your views on how the sector can benefit?
I will follow the optimism. I think that new technologies are allowing us real-time monitoring, analysis, and learning, and I think that we need to do much more of that. And also, I think we need to share much more within South Asia. I think there's so much more room for improvement, as they would say, on that regard. And I always feel funny when we talk about South Asia and scaling. You can't have bigger scale than here, and that's amazing potential. Thank you.
Thanks, Boyan. Fazlul Bhai, you've already given a very nice lead by saying that you're moving towards an insured society. Anything else that you want to add in 30 seconds?
Yes, we have to, it seems that the COVID-19 has come to stay. So we have to maintain we have to do everything in a COVID-19 compliant manner. This is the #1 challenge so that we can get back to as far as possible to the pre-COVID situation. And then we have to combine digital financing with all possible electronic-based solutions for the farmers. That's it.
So create a new normal using technology. Very nice, thank you. And last but not the least, over to you, Sonu, to bring it all together for us.
Thank you, Pranav. And one of the key takeaways for me has been that we need more discussions. I mean, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. There is a need that experts from various disciplines, production sciences, plant sciences, insurance, finance, warehousing. There's so many, areas, domains which merge together, and which need to be synchronized and synergized so that we can really raise farm incomes. And so I think more discussions are required on this matter. And I would say that this is first in the series of discussions we will have on this matter. And we would invite more experts on our panels, take their feedback and try to reach to a conclusion, which and some tangible action items which can be actually implemented. So we'll reach out to everyone, all the panelists, all the attendees, take their feedback, collate it, present it in a nice paper, and then further share it with all of you so that you can give your feedback and we can have hopefully another round of discussion on this matter. So I'll stop here, and I would like to thank you, Pranav, for moderating this session so well, taking time out of your busy schedule, and really managing it very well for all of us. And thanks to all the panelists and attendees.
Thank you, everybody. It's been great talking to everybody, and we look forward to continuing the discussion, as Sonu says.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a good day, afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. All the best.
Thanks to all the participants.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, Vijay.